In the diverse pantheon of the Forgotten Realms, there exist many deities and demigods covering a myriad of domains, denominations, alignments, and mortal proclivities. Today we profile a deity that represents the elemental plane of air, the embodiment of freedom, and serves as the nomadic paragon of incessant exploration, both upon the material world and within the individual spirit. Akadi, the ephemeral goddess of the sky, right now on Riches and Liches. The goddess known as Akadi is as ethereal as the domain she represents. The Queen of the Sky is an entity of elemental power, embodying the essence of air and the freedom of movement within the deified pantheon of gods, each exerting their own distinct influence upon the mortal plane. While unique to the Forgotten Realms, Akadi echoes the very deities of air, wind, and sky found in many ancient cultures throughout our own history. Such deities as Aeolus, the divine keeper of the winds in Greek mythology, or the Mesopotamian god Enlil, who held domain over air, storms, and the very breath of life, as well as being the chief deity of the Sumerian pantheon. Akadi shares similarities with Vayu, the Hindu deity of wind and the divine messenger of their gods, who is also seen as a life-giver and a force of ruin when roused. And in Norse mythology, Njord, the god of the wind, sea, and father of Freya, who might be seen as a parallel to Akadi in his aspect as a deity who guides the destinies of those who travel by air or sea. The origin of the name Akadi is a bit of a mystery, perhaps whispered by the winds of antiquity, as there exists no known or recorded religious etymology. However, while no official lineage of the goddess's name exists, the word itself may be derived from the Indo-European language of Marathi, spoken by over 70 million native speakers of India. There we find exact name references to a botanical plant used in ancient medicine, and even the treble beating stick of the tabor, a form of musical drum often used in religious ceremony. Although I offer these as nothing more than my own suppositions to this D&D god's real-world origins. Regardless, with roots tracing the deity's lore to the earliest 1st edition compendiums of Dungeons & Dragons, Akadi would replace Misha as the air god in the Faerunian pantheon, first appearing in the 1987 2nd edition resource, Manual of the Planes. With her discovery, Akadi became a deity whose essence was deeply intertwined with the concepts of air, wind, and the boundless skies. Her followers, guided by doctrine, are encouraged to roam and engage in the ceaseless exploration both physically upon the land and skies of the realm, as well as within oneself, eternal pilgrims of the winds. And it is from this mythological dogma and narrow stricture of her faith that she is likely best known as the patron deity of the ARE creator race. Birthed from the divine breath of Akadi herself, the ARE, forever enshrined as the third of the 5 creator races in the historical record, they are the ancient avian progenitors to the Aarakocra, the Kinku, and owlbears of today's bestiaries. The Lady of Air bestowed upon them not just the gifts of flight and agility, but also imbued them with an intrinsic connection to the element of air and an insatiable urge to explore. Akadi's essence flowed through the ARE in these most nascent ages, bestowing upon the ARE a near celestial but fleeting status, as profiled in Volume 4 of our Forgotten Realms history. Links below if you'd like to know more about that age known as the Time of Dragons. Like all deities and demigods, as well as nearly all matters of religion, the lore is often colored and conflicted by the mortal hands who write the various accounts, mandates, and histories of the gods, leaving these antiquarian records for modern reading as both imperfect and open to your own chosen faith and dogma. And in this respect, the Lady of Air is no different. Revered in ancient chronicles from the 1st and through the 3rd editions of the realm's lore, Akadi was one of the 4 primary elemental deities believed to transcend the ravages of time. Yet debatable accounts have recently emerged following the cataclysmic events of the Spell Plague in 1385 Dale Reckoning that have cast doubt upon Akadi's status as a true goddess. These theoretical writings, found in the Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition Forgotten Realms campaign guide, instead positing Akadi's powers manifest as that of a primordial entity, a member of that ancient elemental race that once sought to claim these realms as their own, the result of which was the banishment of those primordial powers to Abir following the Sundering in the age known as the Dawn War, which we have also profiled in a past dedicated video. However, according to this alternative and certainly arguable history, as found on page 78 of the 4E resource, the Forgotten Realms Campaign Guide, Akadi, unlike most of her kind, did not engage in this conflict with the gods, the Dawn War, and thus has maintained her influence as one of 5 primordial elemental lords who were allowed to remain upon the world of Toril. It should be made very clear here that this wholly abstract and alternative history is only present in the 4th edition lore, which is far more often found to be the most heretical in terms of theory and fact. So I leave it up to you, dear listener, to find your own path to the canonical lore. But regardless of your chosen doctrine, to her faithful, Akadi is the primary but mostly unseen aspect element of air, the whispering wind and the blinding gale, her form known to change from season to season, her kiss upon the mortal realm ranging from soft and moist to cold and biting. As we move forward through the chapters in this Deities and Demigods profile, one thing will become clear. This ever-changing, almost transitory deity exhibits several traits most uncommon among the more traditional of gods and godlike beings who are so divinely represented in the mortal realm. The goddess of wind exerts control and fiercely defends a domain overlooked and that most often works unseen, yet is vital to each and every creature upon the mortal plane. Akadi's deific powers have remained stable and unflinching through the passage of time and are tied intrinsically to the critical elemental force of air. Hers is a vital dominion that oversees invisible currents that circulate warmth from the tropics to blend with the vast cold of the poles. The Lady of Air's sphere of influence ferries the seeds of life to the far corners of the world, lifts avian creatures into flight, and bears the eternal burden of carrying the sounds of our joy and agony across the realm. Perhaps most unnoticed, Akadi's elemental domain empowers, even permits, the quiet breathing of the slumbering world. For we must always remember her authority grants purview over all living creatures, as breath is the first and last sign of our very existence, something taken for granted until the moment it escapes our being and never returns. Akadi demonstrates many traits and a level of ambiguity that make her unique among the gods. Among them is the deity's own mortal portrayal. While only limited material representations of her exist, mostly in the various works of art and the teachings and texts of her clerics, it must also be noted that their forms and silhouettes are quite disparate, often visualized from the individual marks and experiences of those touched by her guidance and command. Her form ever shifting and transient, prone to change from one moment to the next, mirroring the fickle nature of the wind she embodies. Some cultures depict Akadi as a winged angelic being of various soft blue hues and trailing white clouds. Other sects show her as a pale azure goddess with storm-born wings that cascade into their ferocious winds. Yet others revere her as a more formless entity, the divine ethereal spirit that embodies the mostly unseen or blurred essence of air. Indeed, the figure of the goddess finds its worshipped form as divergent as a whispering wind is to a turbulent tempest. For example, in the savage horde lands of the Endless Waste, her believers portray Akadi as a darker goddess, a beauty of raven hair and wings and commanding of the storm-filled skies above. Yet to the people of Zakara, Akadi is depicted alongside the elemental gods of earth, water, and fire as a cold goddess uncaring for mortals and in direct opposition to their own gods of enlightenment. Still, all these varied manifestations are born from a presence that is most often felt or seen through the proxy of impact her elemental domain has upon the land and seas, thus leaving a lot to interpretation and personal or even communal experience as much as any religious influence. Regardless of any of the representative forms created by mankind, it is said that on the rare occasions when Akadi truly interacts with the mortal world, she will always be escorted by her azure guard. This sentinel group consists of a dozen powerful female divine air genasi warrior defenders who have utterly and completely devoted their lives to her protection. When not in one of her many material aspect forms, it is said that Akadi dwells within the eye of a great tornadic whirlwind, where she can choose, upon her temperamental whim, to rarely let mortals pass into her sanctum, or, more often, simply tear them apart, their hubris and remains scattered to the winds. The symbol with the strongest fidelity to the principles of Akadi are that of a cloud representing the ever-present and all-encompassing nature of air. Her colors are the pale blues of the daytime sky, the deep indigos of the twilight, and the mixed grays of rolling storm clouds. While Akadi's symbology is far less emphasized as compared to many, even most, of the Faerunian pantheon, these various motifs of dedication will still be found on the occasional flags, woven into the garments of her clergy, or even tattooed on the bodies of her most devout disciples. While primarily characterized as a female goddess, Akadi is also one of the few deities whose gender can be as fleeting and ever-changing as the clouds in the sky, often assigned titles from either gender based upon the culture and region of her followers. Indeed, Akadi carries many names and titles: Goddess of the Sky, Mistress of the Winds, Lady of the Air, and most interesting, she is also referred to as Telos, the Lord of Storms, by those faithful of the Endless Wastes, who draw no distinction to her gender, often using both male and female titles such as Lord and Lady interchangeably. As a side note, I personally found this last reference to her as Telos, the Lord of Storms, to be most fascinating, especially when juxtaposed against another well-known god of the Forgotten Realms, Talos, the chaotic evil deity of similar domain, who is also referred to as the Storm Lord. Telos, Talos, both deities of storm, certainly close enough that one has to at least wonder or consider if at some point in the ancient record of the realms, these two gods, their followers, and even the stories, tales, and other historical or theological accounts were ever conflated, on purpose or even by accident. But regardless of the name or title used, Akadi's role as an elemental being places her in an uncommon position within the celestial hierarchy, one that transcends some of the more typical divine concerns to become a symbol of the primal force that shapes the Forgotten Realms, her influence felt not only on the mortal world, but throughout the elemental planes. In a break from the more traditional of religious doctrine, devotees of Akadi have a unique relationship with their goddess, one that is based on mutual respect of the natural world rather than subservience. They view her interventions not as miracles, but as natural phenomena guided by the hand of the goddess. A well-timed gust of wind that fills a ship's sails, or a sudden draft that disperses a smothering heat. It's these acts that are seen as Akadi's whispers of her will, her satisfaction or animus, often subtle, yet always impactful. Her clergy, commonly referred to as airwalkers, are tasked with understanding these signs to interpret and communicate the will of the skies to her followers. The most devout serve as mediators, ensuring that Akadi's essence is not bound or controlled, for to do so would be antithetical to her divine mandate. These clerics are divided into two categories, not of rank but purpose. The whisper, consisting of those working behind the scenes, foundationally if you will, while those called the roar are often the most charismatic and evangelical in spreading Akadi's message. That is not to say that the ministry of the Lady of Air does not have an organized and ranked hierarchy. Novice priests, new to the order, are referred to as fledglings who will only be considered for promotion after participating in a witnessed ritual of flight. Other titles within the institution ascend as winged ones, heir of the goddess, and breeze of the light, all hoping to eventually reach the upper ranks of Zephyr, Mistral, Sirocco, and Whirlwind. And just like most religions, violence does have its place. As of special note, any priest of Akadi who slays any agent of Grumbar, the elemental Earth Lord known as the King of the Land Below the Roots, is awarded the additional prefix title of High added to their current rank. As we turn our attention from the clergy to the flock, we find that in the worship of Akadi, the goddess of the sky has a diverse lot of believers. They are the sailors who seek favorable winds to fill their sails, adventurers who relish the thrill of freedom, mystics who find profound wisdom in the currents of air around them, and the nomadic farmers and herders who pray for her gentle rains. The Air Genasi in particular venerate her with an intense passion, seeing themselves as her children of the wind. Yet another departure from the often seen religious zealotry and ceremony of other gods, Akadi's religious practices are decidedly decentralized and very individualistic. They often involved a myriad of personal rituals where one might cast a feather into the wind with a prayer of breath, climb to the highest nearby peak to offer meditation and a connection to her spiritual essence, or release lanterns into the sky to symbolize letting go of any materialistic roots that might be grounding the nomadic spirit. And Akadi demands no dedicated or fixed holy days. Instead, individuals seek impromptu or significant moments when the shifts of wind signal change. Perhaps during the first breath of a newborn creature, the celebration of life's perpetuity. One commonality found in all her worshippers is the shared belief that in every breath there is silent prayer to Akadi, and in every sigh a release of worldly bindings. Of significant importance to Akadi's rulership over the movement, speed, and travel of the skies is a strong emphasis on the freedom that comes with the ability to wander unchained. Her followers find solace in the boundless horizons and the liberty to traverse the realms, exploring the world's hidden corners in a constant state of movement, rarely settling down. A tendency most evident in her priests who are as mercurial as the deity they serve. Mirroring this migrant philosophy, they seldom erect temples in her name. Instead, they worship Akadi in the open, where the sky stretches unimpeded. Seeing the world itself as her temple, the lack of strict dogma and physical shrines highlight her ethos of limitless and incessant exploration. This wandering sentiment is further reinforced as her clergy and the more devout of her followers often abandon the ideal of permanent homes, favoring to travel the world, often in nomadic communes, to spread Akadi's tenets through their teachings of constant migration and discovery. But one of the most paradoxical facets of Akadi's religious creed is a subject of intense study and heated debate among scribes, scholars, and even theologians. At the center of this controversy is the definitive, self-evident, and even provable lack of the far more conventional forms of gospel and demand for worship and adoration found in the theologies and mythologies of most other Faerunian gods. And of critical importance, its impact upon the understood mechanisms of how deified powers are amplified or fade, or in the case of Akadi, a lack thereof. The absence of temples and statues, as well as the rarity of other forms of dedicated art and architecture, seem at odds with the understood belief that a god's power is inherently tied to the devotion they command from mortals. Akadi's divergence from this conventional divinity, where godly power is often correlated with the number of worshippers amassed, simply flies in direct contradiction to the generally understood principle that to truly annihilate a deity, one must erase their influence by turning every follower away from their teachings. Here again, Akadi's own precept and her very existence challenges this notion, and only further suggests a deeper truth about Akadi's nature and her own godlike powers, one that might support, at least circumstantially, the primordial theory I shared in Chapter 1. Alternatively, her choice not to demand worship or overt reverence could be interpreted as the purest form of religious expression, one that transcends physical manifestations, perhaps even tied directly to the very fabric of the weave, or even the multiverse. Her disciples would postulate that through the infusion of her essence into the fundamental act of breathing and the ubiquitous presence of the wind, that Akadi secures her immortality and elemental power in a way that is more profound than those more classic faiths and creeds. Nonetheless, for all the reasons I have outlined here, Akadi's reach of faith is significant, but often unacknowledged. The faithful believe every living being partakes in her domain with every breath they take, yet only a few recognize this act of devotion. The paradox of her worship is that it is both everywhere and yet overlooked. This duality makes her faith widespread, but also enigmatic, with dedicated followers being fewer than those of the more demanding deities. Yet the devout and others who are attuned to the nuances of the air find profound depth in this unspoken omnipresence. Akadi is the personification of true neutrality. Her myopic but resolute strictures as unchanging as her dominion over sky and wind. Unfettered, they transcend all mortal concepts of good and evil, law and chaos, only reflecting the impartial nature of the air that grants breath to all creatures, regardless of their deeds or desires. As one of only a handful of true neutral deities, it is in her unaligned disposition that she becomes the elemental force of equilibrium within the realm, always seeking balance in all things, whether perceived as good or evil by temporal eyes. Akadi's ethos is one of freedom and expedition without caveat or condition, pure in its determination, emphasizing her role as a deity who presides over the ever-changing currents of the world and does so without favor or prejudice, not unlike another, the dragon deity Asgaroth we've profiled in the past. Link below. Akadi is neither friend nor foe, ally nor adversary. The Lady of Air is solely and forever focused on the portfolio she commands. In this pursuit, she rarely meddles in the affairs or predilections of mortals, or even other gods unless they tread upon or otherwise impact her authority. Yet her influence is undeniable and her power respected, for even the gods require the use of the air she governs. Akadi's influence upon the material plane is often subtle, yet sublime and undeniable to her faithful. Her domain and influence places Akadi in a position of quiet power, like the gentle touch of a breeze that coaxes a flower to release its sweet fragrant scent, still knowing she also holds the capability for immense destruction, as seen in the power of a storm that fells the mightiest of oaks. The Queen of Air is a deity whose absence would be profoundly felt, though her presence is often taken for granted. Broadly speaking, Akadi as a neutral deity has few true allegiances. However, given her domain, a strong presence in the earliest ages of Torel, and her role in the creation of many notable avian creatures of the realm, it should come as no surprise that the mythological texts consistently list the same 6 deities and demigods as having favorable relationships with Akadi. Corlin, the lesser deity of the Kinku, who presides over the portfolios of trickery, disguise, and theft. Remnus, a primal spirit and great lord of giant eagles with his golden wings and glowing green eyes. Shandakul, a lesser deity of travelers who venture into uncharted territory. Strawnmaz, the neutral good deity, part of the giant pantheon, and son of Anum the Allfather. Arguably the most powerful among this list, Strawnmaz is most worshipped by storm giants of the realm, and he presides over the domain of life and storm. And finally, Sirenita, the patron deity of the Aarakocra, and Airdrie Fania, the elven goddess of the Seldarine, who is also known to be worshipped by the Aarakocra and is closely allied with Sirenita. So much so, there is speculation that they share the protection portfolio for the Aarakocra, and some scholars go further to posit they may actually be 2 names and 2 forms for the same or possibly a merged deity. There are other far more vague references, such as what may be one of the more obscure in the entire Faerunian pantheon, a little-known elemental power called Stillsong, said to wander the river Oceanus and favor Delphons and moondogs. Yet despite her agreeable nature with a few like-minded deities, Akadi's ideology of unbridled freedom can sometimes put her at odds with other deities that espouse strict order and control. and she has on occasion crossed boundaries of a few specific gods where those borderlines have become blurred. This most often occurs with Umberlee at sea in the events where she has tried to quell a raging ocean storm, and with the aforementioned Talos the Stormlord under the same circumstances upon land. Where Talos and Umberlee seek to wield storms as weapons of chaotic ruin, Akadi is far more representative of the neutral order and elemental aspects of air in all its forms, from the gentlest breeze to the most ferocious gale, its very nature, her nature, unpredictable and unrestrained. Thus, this divine dynamic is both complicated and tempestuous, reflecting the clash between the rage and annihilating fury of evil gods seeking dominance and the wild, untamed freedom of the elements running its intended course, which ironically would most often look identical from a mortal point of view. But I have yet to mention the single exception to Akadi's neutral to all position, as she has but one true enemy, hinted at during our discussion on the clerics of Akadi. A timeless conflict where the pendulum swings from bitter rivalry to outright hatred. Grumbar, the immutable Earthlord. Born from the intrinsic opposition of their domains and philosophies, where Akadi is fleeting and ethereal in her portfolio of agility, freedom, and exploration, Grumbar stands rigid and firm, embodying the unyielding, resistant to change as the intractable density of Earth. Their hatred manifests in the tumultuous storms that batter a mountain's face, the unseen but evident sculpting of canyons and valleys over millennia, and in the howling winds that erode stoic cliffsides, all challenging the very permanence of the world, of the Earthlord's domain. This elemental discord is part of the very DNA of the planet, a conflict perhaps designed to be eternal, a rather fitting fate for a deity who seeks balance in all things. As we close out this profile on the goddess of wind, we find ourselves standing only at the edge of understanding, gazing at the expanse of a deity as immense as the skies above our realms. Our efforts to acquire and understand all the lore that encompasses Akadi's nature seems as folly as any attempt to capture the echo of a melodic whisper carried upon her wind. Each attempt a reflection of beauty, yet ultimately only further evidence to the elusiveness of her true meaning. Our journey, though fraught with the intangibility of our subject, has not been without its revelations. For in attempting to chronicle all that is the ephemeral goddess, we've discovered she is the whisper carried by invisible currents, the unseen painter of the moody skies, and the silent guardian over the very breath that fills our lungs, a subtlety and certainty that is felt in the soul but unseen by the eyes. Her dominion governed not by the clamor of temple bells or decorated ceremony, but by the embrace of a natural balance in all things, and the untethered freedom of exploration and wonder. This divine portrait we have painted today is of a goddess of breeze and storm, a deity who needs neither idol nor icon, for her temple is the open sky, her altars the lofty crags that crown these forgotten realms, and her divine doctrine the silent paths carved by the ever-wandering nomadic winds. I hope you enjoyed this week's volume of Deities and Demigods. What god in the Forgotten Realms pantheon would you most like to see profiled next? Be sure to let me know down in the comments. As we close, I want to express my desire to keep this channel sponsor-free. If you'd like to help, please check out the links below where you can join my Patreon for free. And if you think I earned it, please like and subscribe. Thanks for listening, and until next time, remember, the only limitation at your table is your imagination.